Welcome to a bonus episode of the Geeks Out Podcast 300th episode celebration. So many titles. We're doing a retrospective of the first year of FlameCon. And joining us for a conversation is one of my favorite people, James Tynion IV. Enjoy. And we've come to another interview in our FlameCon retrospective, looking back at our first year of FlameCon back in the long ago of 2015. Joining me is one of my favorite people, James Tynion IV. James, for those who are not familiar with your work, and I don't know who those people would be, but those poor people, please inform them of who you are and what you do.
Well, I am a comic book writer. I work on a bunch of different titles. A lot of people know me for my work at DC Comics, where recently I was the writer of Batman. But, I also write a whole bunch of creator-owned titles, like Something is Killing the Children at Boom Studios, and win the GLAAD Award nominated 2 years in a row series Wind with Michael Dialynas. And then series like The Department of Truth at Image and Nice House on the Lake at DC Black Label.
Those are
so yeah, but it's I write a lot of spooky comics where bad things happen to good people, and that's just how I roll. But yeah.
To say that you are a busy person is putting it mildly. Like all of those books you're currently working on, plus you're working on Batman, as you mentioned. You're also doing a Joker series.
Yeah, I'm thankfully I'm all wrapped on Batman right now. I still have one issue left to write of Joker, but then I am kind of stepping away from capes and tights for a while. So I can really focus on my own work, which I am really excited about. Also because I am working on too many books all at the same time. But that's it's one of those things where I started each of these projects with this idea in my head that, I never knew whether or not I was going to find an audience. So I had all of these projects lined up that were sort of like contingency plans. And then they all started coming out and people kept reading them. So I was like, oh boy, I got to keep writing all of these, which is, a tremendous honor, but it's also means that I do not sleep enough. I do not sleep remotely enough. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm like, this is still the dream. I've going all the way back. I spent a decade in superhero comics, and now I'm able to really just tell the sorts of stories that I want to tell, and in the sizes and shapes I want to tell them. I get to try out new delivery systems, and I get to try out lots of different stuff, and just sort of follow the sorts of stories that I want to tell, which is it's just the creative ideal.
I hope to have even a quarter of your motivation and drive. Let's take you back 8 years to the very first FlameCon. What are some of your favorite memories from that day?
Oh boy. I mean, it was such I remember the lead up to the show, in this big way, because there was a lot of enthusiasm about it, but you never know, with the, especially a kind of small independent show, is this something where there's a lot of enthusiasm online, and then you show up and, no one's there filling the aisles. And it's just like, and I really had no idea what to expect. No idea. I knew I was going to see some of my friends who were going to be, vendors at the show. And I knew it was something where I was a big fan of Geeks Out, and I wanted to be there and participate, but it was just it was a massive question mark. And then we got there, and it was just filled with really, really excited people who like had been waiting for this moment, who had really, really wanted to pick up books, and not just like one type of book. Because I mean, that's you know, I write you know, Wind is a YA series. I did a all ages series called Backstagers a few years ago, but I feel like, you know, sometimes it's sort of like people put the queer audience in a box, and it was just like really exciting to see that no, there were hardcore like superhero fans there. There were people who wanted like comics from the entire spectrum of, you know, queer identity and also the queer audience. And it was just like, and everyone came there with money in their pockets, and they wanted to spend that money on queer books and queer creators. And it was, you know, it was just such a thrilling moment. And then, you know, the other thing I remember, like, oh, here's a great picture. I got to meet the amazing Cecil Baldwin from Welcome to Night Vale, and, you know, which was one of my favorite podcasts at the time. And, you know, it was like, it was just this really cool, really, really cool, like, thing to be a part of. And I, you know, we were in the Grand Prospect Hall, which had absolutely no air conditioning. So everyone was like melting. Like the handful, I felt like especially bad for the like handful of cosplayers there who like looked like they were like disintegrating as they were walking through. But it was just like, I remember like, you know, I tend to, you know, like layer up in terms of like, cause you know, you expect a convention hall to be like,
freezing
you know,
cold.
Yeah, like somehow like too cold and too humid all at the same time is like the standard vibe at a convention. And it's like, no, this is just like but it was just like, it was a really warm and welcoming place.
Literally,
and
very warm.
yeah, in a few different ways. And no, you know, it was just it was really incredible to be a part of.
Oh, I mean, we had a lot of different varieties of exhibitors, both long established, like Phil Jimenez, to some very new and indie creators. And it's been wonderful to see your career just thrive in the past like 8 years. You know, that's the thing is like a friend of mine who has had success, and is something that they've always said, is that rising tide raises all ships, and that your increase in your profile helps other queer artists, and to boost their profiles as well, you know.
Yeah.
And especially since, you know, all of your work, there is queerness involved in the storylines, you know.
Yeah.
Queer storylines, queer characters. I mean, I can gush about your career over the past 8 years, but how have you felt things have changed for you in the past 8 years?
Well, honestly, one of the first things that came to mind when you asked me to come on this, I was like just thinking back to 2015, and at that moment, I like felt like I don't know. It's like I had already come over the first summit of like, oh, it's like I'm writing superhero comics. I have like you know, a couple of creator owned things. I have a few more things coming down the line. I think at that point I had already, you know, I was you know, I had just wrapped the first Batman Eternal weekly, and I was working on the second Batman and Robin Eternal, and it was just like I felt like, oh, I've like already conquered the world. And then I look back and it's like I was only 3 years into my career at that point. Like I was still a baby, and so it's just funny to look back at that kind of I don't know. I definitely had a little bit of ego and confidence, and a bit of ambition. But I, you know, over the last, you know, like over the last 7, 8 years, it's been an incredibly exciting, gratifying, often frustrating journey to sort of get to tell the stories that I wanted to tell and the way that I wanted to tell them. And I think I was really concerned excuse me, I was really concerned when I started my my comic career that the more open I was about myself, the more I would be put into a box, and I would only be allowed to do to write certain kinds of comics. And what I wanted to write is like I wanted to play with all the big guns. I wanted to play with the biggest characters in the biggest at the biggest companies, and then I wanted to build these like big worlds, and I wanted to have the, you know, and I didn't want to I didn't want to cater them or anything. I just wanted them to be what I wanted them to be. And I don't know, in the last year it's just been incredibly gratifying. The last couple of years in particular, it's been incredibly gratifying to see series like you know, Department of Truth, which has a queer lead, you know, break six figures launching at Image. And it's great to see, you know, like the spin-off title of Something is Killing the Children, House of Slaughter, which is, you know, the first arc focuses on a queer relationship. And like that was one of the top two best-selling titles in the direct market last year. And it is just one of those things where I don't, even I couldn't have bet on on all of that. And I'm incredibly grateful, and I am incredibly grateful to the fans who have been able to who've been there supporting me every step of the way, and who just want to read these stories, because, you know, at the end of the day, I'm still writing, you know, either for myself today, or very often I'm writing for myself like age 16 to 18. Like that's the me that's like sitting in there, where it's just like I was reading, you know, at that age I was reading all of these great Vertigo books and like all of these great Image books and superhero books, and it was just like, but there was no queerness in any of them. And it's not that I wanted like the books to be like queer before everything else. I just wanted to see like myself a little bit in like a really like brutal horror story because I like those are my favorite types of stories, and I want to exist in them.
Right. I mean, representation is everything, even if it's, you know, you're seeing yourself getting slaughtered in the pages. So.
Well, and it's also like horror taps into like the deep fears and the deep feelings of, you know, of just being alive. And it's just like those are the emotions I want to explore. And, you know, I use genre as a shortcut to like get to the nerves of what I'm trying to say. And, you know, like, yeah, I'm really happy. I'm really happy that I get to make these books.
Well, and I mean, you've been honored and acknowledged for the work that you've done. The Woods, which came out when you were at FlameCon that first year, was awarded a GLAAD Media Award.
Oh yeah,
and you got an Eisner. And
I think I can. There they are. They're hanging up on the shelf right behind me. It's like I just need to move my head to not block me. Yeah. Like right there next to my Punchline Funko Pop. So yeah, it's, you know, the like all awards of equal, like, you know, I've got my GLAAD Award, my Diamond Gem, my Eisner, and my Punchline Funko Pop. They are each awards in their own way.
Yes. Well, and you know, even with the working in the sandbox of the capes and tights, you've introduced new characters, you know, that have really spoken to people, and including in, I think, one of your newer creations, Ghostmaker, who is this very braggadocious pansexual vigilante, like badass. So
yeah. No, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to introduce like you know, a like an absolutely chaotic queer person to interact with the Batman universe. And that is, you know, because I mean that is the thing where it's just like, I don't know, like we all know as queer people that most most queer people are a bit chaotic.
I don't know what you're talking about. No.
And so it's just like, you know, getting to capture a bit of that energy. And it's also just, I don't know, like getting to like, you know, tackle all of these different corners of the Batman mythology, and just, you know, like I remember, and part of it is just like there's also just a sheer utility of it, which,
Mhm.
you know, I think sometimes people forget that. But it's just like I worked on 2 Batman weeklies, and do you know how many like times where we bumped into, it's just like, okay, like let's pull up the list of like female Batman villains, and even that list, like those characters were all being used in the existing side titles, so it's just like, you know, we had to like go all the way down the list to like Scorpiana, like who showed up in like 3 pages of an issue like 5 years before the book. And it was
Yeah.
just like, you know, like creating more characters from more diverse backgrounds that have real depth, that, you know, like, and just exist as part of the world, where it's just like they are, their presence there is matter of fact. It's not
Mhm.
trying to just make a statement in and of itself. It's just, you know, like like it just makes for a more diverse world, which is more realistic and has, you know, like the potential for more storylines. And it's not just like one kind of diversity, it's like making sure that there are people just from different backgrounds, like, you know, in Gotham City, which is so many, like, you know, like which is this like, you know, concentrated urban environment. They're all like, we mostly focus on these very wealthy characters, and
Mhm.
there's not even just like a diversity of just like people from different like backgrounds within Gotham City. And it's just, you know, and they're at every like you know, intersection there's like so many interesting stories to tell. You know, like, and I'm just not interested in telling the same stories over and over again, like just as you know, like classic nerd who's read hundreds and hundreds of Batman comics. I want to read different Batman comics than the ones I've read before. So I'm going to try to write some. And
But
that's
when are
been
you
the
gonna
goal.
write, you know, about Batman's parents dying again?
Oh, I've done that plenty.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I think
uh,
one thing that I'm very proud of is I actually wrote the panel of, I did the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover, and a
yeah.
panel from that has become a meme online where Batman explains to Raphael like the death of his parents, and it's just like, in like taken out in context, I think the scene is like, I love that scene, but it out of context, it is just such a ludicrous panel. It's like, this is where my parents died, Raphael. And it's just like the most lunatic thing, but it's the kind of lunacy that can only happen in comics.
Yeah.
And so I love that it's like spreading around. I saw like Parappa the Rappa version of it that absolutely made my day.
No, speaking about you know, being in one of the big twos, but also in sort of the smaller publishers and indie publishing and self-publishing, um, how have you seen the industry change in the past like 8 years?
It's really interesting. I mean, I think we're seeing an industry that's going through a lot of growing pains, to be honest. And I think that there's, you know, like the comics audience is larger than it's been at any point in my life. Like when I was a kid, kids had stopped reading comics like entirely. Like, you know, maybe you would get a strip, like a collection of Calvin and Hobbes strips or something like that, but there just wasn't an like a market for for kids to read comics. And you know, when I was in middle school and high school, that was when the first manga boom happened in the early 2000s, and that really like injected like all of these, you know, because comics had narrowed what they
Hmm.
were, and it had a shrinking audience that was shrinking and shrinking. And then the manga boom, and then the rise of web comics, and like started like this, you know, slow spread and expansion of the comic reading and the comic creating community. And now we're seeing all of those people who were, you know, roughly my age, who were, you know, like in middle school right at that like extremely formative moment. They've grown up and they're making their own comics, and they're not interested in just making one narrow type of comics. They're interested in making all sorts of comics. and they're interested in doing that on their own terms. And, you know, I think that, you know, the direct market hasn't fully adjusted to that reality. And in that moment, we've seen, you know, manga come back in with like a burning force, and we've seen a bunch of American publishers basically not even try to, like, you know, enter the fray in a serious, like, in a serious way. And we've seen, you know, like, but it's an incredibly exciting moment. It's a moment of big change, and I don't think I can't even predict the shape of what the industry will look like in 5-10 years. But one thing that I remember, you know, 10 years ago, like when I was breaking into the industry, there were questions of like, will there be, like, is comics in this form going to die out, and then we'll just see the, you know, the death of an industry? And the answer is no. It's going to change. It's going to change. But now there are enough people who are just reading comics that there is an audience for them. And then there are creators who are just not going to just sit back and wait until like the publishers figure it out. They're going to go off their own way and try to figure it out themselves. And it's just like, that is incredibly inspiring. And it's a really cool moment, that, you know, there's still a bunch of huge question marks, but it's an exciting moment to be working.
Yeah, we'll see what the future holds, as it were. Now I know you are working nonstop and sleeping, you know, every other day or something like that. But what are you getting down and nerdy with? What are you consuming in pop culture when you have your downtime?
I mean, I really enjoyed the first season of Yellow Jackets. It was really good. And I don't know. I will say that I've been digging more into the classics. Like, one of my recent projects is I'm trying to like finally go back and read all of the great horror and science fiction short stories in prose that I've known for years that I need to sit down and read, and I just haven't. And now I am finally going back, and I'm like, you know, I'm trying to knock a few of them out at a time. And, you know, it's just like rediscovering Ray Bradbury, who I haven't really read seriously since I was 15. And it's just like understanding it through the lens of being an adult writer who works in the genre space is you know, it's like, it's eye opening, and it really, I don't know, it's making me think a lot about the types of stories that I tell, and this, like, where I want my work to go in the future. And yeah, and it's like, you know, I think that there are a bunch of amazing comics out there right now. Like, I'm, you know, a sucker for everything that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips do. You know, I got a sneak peek at the next volume of Reckless, and it's just like, shocker, like, those are some of the best comics being made in the entire world right now, and the fourth volume is as good as the first 3 volumes. And I don't know, it's the, like, I've been like, at some point in the next 6 months, I'm sure I'm going to do a big catch up on all things superhero, but I've been enjoying kind of stepping out of the, you know, of the world of capes and tights, and like kind of broadening my sphere of influence and seeing how that, you know, affects my writing. And, you know, it's all experimentation, and it's having fun, and it's trying to get better. And, you know, it's just trying to put interesting things in my brain. That's that's the way I try to keep thinking about it.
Well, I for one am excited to see all of the creations that you come up with next, and the continuing storylines that you have going on. Where can people find you?
Oh boy. I have a newsletter at James Tynion IV .substack.com. I'm not really on Twitter anymore, which was a great decision. But my publishing label, Tiny Onion, has a Twitter at Read Tiny Onion. So all spelled out. So just, you know, if you want to know if you are a Twitter person, that's probably the best place to find me. Otherwise, I'm like trying to spend less and less time looking at the like at the internet, so I don't have a lot of other places to find me right now.
Totally understand. Totally understand. And then you also have Razor Blades, which is your magazine as well.
Yeah, no, and
So
that's it was a self-published horror anthology magazine, and right now I just transitioned web stores, so I don't those volumes are not like those will be re-released online in the next month or so, but there is a collected edition of the entire the first 5 issues coming out in hardcover later this year from Image Comics.
that's awesome. So people can check out Something is Killing the Children, which is out now. Department of Truth, which is out now. Nice House on the Lake, which is all out now. If you like horror and things that make your spine tingle. There is Wind, if you just love a very heartwarming fantasy series that just gets you in the young queer feels.
And nominated for GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comic Book 2 years in a row. So
that's right.
So check that one out.
And then recently announced the forthcoming, you're dipping your toe into the Sandman universe. So
oh yeah, with Nightmare Country featuring the Corinthian. So yes. I am, that's the one book I'm working on over the next year with characters that are not my own. And I am very, very excited for people to read that one. It's my love letter to all things Sandman, and I would not be a comic writer today if not for Sandman.
Well, thank you, James, for talking with us and looking back at FlameCon and the past 8 years. We look forward to seeing you at a future FlameCon when, if not this year, then soon. As we return August 20th and 21st at the Sheridan in Midtown Manhattan. So
well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining us for these retrospects. And here's looking to the future.